Good morning. Today we are going to do Unit 4 for Standard 12 English CBSE. The Rat Trap. Now, Selma Lagerlof was a Swedish writer whose stories have been translated into many languages. A universal theme runs through all of them, a belief that the essential goodness in human being can be awakened through understanding and love. That every person has some innate goodness, and that goodness can be awakened if people understand and express love. This story is set amidst the mines of Sweden, rich in iron ore, with figures large in the history and legends of that country. The story is told somewhat in a manner of fairy tale. Once upon a time, there was a man who had small red traps of wire. He made them himself moments from the material in the stores or at the big farms. So he didn't really spend anything to make those red traps. But even so, the business was not especially profitable, so he had to resort to both begging and petty thievery to keep body and soul together. To remain alive, he had to do, do stealing and beg also. Even so, his clothes were in rags, his cheeks sunken, and hunger gleamed in his eyes. So he looked poor from all points of view. No one can imagine how sad and monotonous life can appear to such a vagabond. Vagabond is a person without a home or wanders from one place to another. No one can imagine how sad and monotonous. Monotonous means boring, doing same thing every day. Who plods along the road, who keeps walking around the road with difficulty, left to his own meditation, and he keeps on thinking about and deeply about his own world. But one day this man had fallen into the line of thought which really seemed to him entertaining. But he started thinking something which seemed to him entertaining. He had naturally been thinking of his red traps when suddenly he was struck by the idea that the whole world about him, the world that sees its cities was nothing but a, a, leg, a big the whole world with its lands and seas, its cities and villages was nothing but a big rat trap. He thought that the whole world is like a rat trap. It had never for any other purpose than to see baits for people. Now say the whole world was, say the baits were put in red trap and it got trapped in that all people trapped for one or the other thing in this world. It offered riches and joys, shelter and food, heat and clothing, exactly as the red trap offers cheese and pork, and as soon as anyone let himself be attempted to touch the bait on him, and then everything came to an end. So every person in this world is behind one thing or the other, and what really happens is when he tries to get that, he gets into that red trap. The world had, of course, never been very kind to him, so it gave him unwanted joy to think ill of it in this way. The world had never given him anything, and so he thought that this world is only bad, and it gave him joy to think that way. It became a cherished pastime of him. During many dreary ploddings, dreary means say dull, uninteresting, walking along the road, at that time, it gave him a cherished pastime, a happy pastime to think of people he knew who had let themselves be caught in the dangerous snare, and of others who were still circling around the bait. The people he knew how they had got into this dangerous snare and how the other people are still getting around to the bait and trying to get into the rat trap that gave him a joy. One dark evening, as he was trudging along the road, he caught sight of a little grey cottage by a roadside. While he was, say, walking slowly with heavy steps, at that time, what happened? He could say he came across a little grey cottage by the roadside, and he knocked on the door to ask shelter for the night. Nor was he refused. He asked for shelter at night, and he was given that. Instead of these sore faces which ordinarily met him, generally when he asked somebody for such kind of a favor, the people's faces turned sour. But here the owner, who was an old man without wife or child, was happy to get someone to talk to in his loneliness. He was alone in the house, and he felt that if somebody like him had come, so he was happy to receive him, this old man. And that would also help him to have a company, and he would not feel alone. Immediately he put the porridge pot on the fire and gave him supper. Then he carved off such slice from his tobacco roll that it was enough both for the stranger's pipe and his own. So he offered him tobacco also after the supper. Finally, he took a pack of cards and played not Jollis with his guest until bedtime. Then he also played cards with him. The old man was just as generous with his confidences as with his porridge and tobacco. Say he easily confided in this man. He easily had, say, trust in this man, and he was generous in having trust, as he was generous in sharing his porridge and tobacco. The guest was informed at once that in his days of prosperity, his host had been a crofter at Ramsjo Iron Works and had worked on the land. The guest started sharing information about himself. Was the guest was informed that at, at once that in his days of prosperity, means when this old man was prosperous, his host had been a crofter at Ramsjo Iron Works. So at that, when he was young and when he was prosperous, he was a crofter at this Ramsjo Iron Works and had worked on the land. Crofter is a person who farms a croft, that is the rented piece of land. Now that he was no longer able to do day labor, it was his cow which supported him. Now it was not possible for him to work and do labor, so the cow supported him. Yes, that bossy was extraordinary. That bossy was really extraordinary. She could give milk for the creamery every day, and last month he had received all of 30 kronor in payment. So, this is what he earned from his cow. The stranger must have seemed incredulous, for the old man got up and took down a leather pouch which hung on a nail in the very window frame and picked out three wrinkled 10 narrow bills. He took out 10 narrow bills, the currency of that place. And in front of the stranger, say he showed him where the money was. And that was, say, unbelievable for the stranger, that in front of me he is trying to show where his money is, and he brought this 10 narrow, the 30 narrow that he had got. These he held up before the eyes of his guest, nodding knowingly, and then stuffed them back into the pouch. He nodded. See, these are the 30 narrows that I earned from this cow, and then he again put it back in the pouch. The pouch was in the window frame on a nail. The next day, both men got up in good season. The crofter was in a hurry to milk his cow, and the other man probably thought he could not stay in bed when the house had gotten up. So they left the cottage at the same time. The crofter locked the door and put the key in his pocket. The man with his red said goodbye and thank you, and thereupon each went his own way. But half an hour later, the red trap peddler stood again before the door. He did not try to get in, however. He only went up to the window, smashed the pane, struck in his hand, and got with the 30 kronor. He took the money and thrust it into his pocket. Then he hung the leather back in its place and went away. As he walked along with the money in his pocket, he felt quite pleased with his smartness. He realized, of course, that at first he dared not continue on the public highway. He realized that as he had stolen Kronor and he was going, so he should not walk on the public highway because in case the man chases him, he would get caught. During the first hour, this walked into the woods, not on the public highway. For the first hour, he was not troubled. Later in the day, it became worse, for it was a big and consuming forest which he had gotten into. He tried, to be sure, to walk in a definite direction, but the paths twisted back and forth so strangely. He walked and walked without coming to the end of the woods, and finally he realized that he had only been walking around in the same part of the forest. All at once he recalled his thoughts about the wolf and red trap. He also had got into the red trap now. Now his own turn had come. He had let himself be fooled by a bait, that is the 30 kronor, and had been caught. The whole forest, with its trunks and branches, its thickets and fallen logs, closed him like an impenetrable prison from which he could never escape. So he himself got trapped.